He had stalked from the woods, hunted from shadows. Now he walked into the city, into light, into view, into memory. This time he wouldn't just kill. He'd leave his fingerprints on San Francisco itself. October 11, 1969, San Francisco. The city glowed in orange street lamp haze as night fell across San Francisco's upscale Presidio Heights. Here families lived quietly. Children slept early, teachers, doctors, bankers, all tucked into Victorian homes nestled on peaceful streets. It was a Friday night, and somewhere in the mist, the Zodiac Killer was hunting again. But unlike before, this would be no rural ambush, no lonely lake, no remote lover's lane. This time he'd kill in the open and vanish before anyone could scream. Paul Stine, a man doing his job. Paul Stine was 29 years old, a former school teacher and part-time cab driver for Yellow Cab Company. That night he was nearing the end of his shift. At 9:55 p.m., Paul picked up a fare at the corner of Mason and Geary Streets, downtown San Francisco. Thoughtful. The destination? He wrote it down. Washington and Maple Street. A short ride, just 10 minutes to the wealthy Presidio Heights neighborhood. Ominous, but Paul would never complete the trip. Chilling, the man in the back seat had other plans. The murder. At 9:58 p.m., residents at 3898 Washington Street heard a loud pop like a firecracker. Moments later, they saw something disturbing from their upstairs window. A man leaning into the front seat of a stopped taxi. They saw the figure wiping down parts of the cab, specifically the driver's side and dashboard, calmly, methodically. Then the man walked away, north up Cherry Street, vanishing into the night. The witnesses immediately called the police. First on the scene, officers Donald Fouke and Eric Zelms responded quickly. Driving westbound on Jackson Street, they passed a man walking eastbound. White male, late 30s to early 40s, stocky build, glasses, crew cut, wearing a brown jacket and dark trousers. He didn't run, he didn't hide. Calm, he just kept walking. Regretful. The officers didn't stop him. Confused. Why? Because the dispatcher had issued the wrong description. Black male suspect. Frustrated. That critical error would allow the Zodiac Killer to escape. After walking directly past police, when they reached the crime scene minutes later, it was already swarming. Somber. And the cab driver, Paul Stine, was dead. Shot once in the head with a 9mm pistol. The scene. Paul's body slumped across the front seat. Blood soaked the interior. Strangely, his wallet and keys were missing. His shirt was cut open. But the most haunting detail? A portion of Paul's bloody shirt was missing, cut cleanly with a knife. The Zodiac had taken it as a trophy, as proof, and San Francisco would never be the same again. The window. The teenage witnesses who saw the killer from their window were sharp. They gave police a full facial description, enough for a composite sketch. The drawing was released within days. Male Caucasian, 35 to 45 years old, 5 feet 8 to 5 feet in 10%, inches stocky build, round face, black-rimmed glasses, a crew cut. It was the first known visual representation of Zodiac's actual face, seen without a mask, in real time, during a crime. For investigators, it was a breakthrough, but for the city, it was terrifying. Because now they knew the Zodiac could be anyone. The man behind them in the grocery line, the postman, the guy walking his dog. He wasn't just a phantom anymore. He had a face. The letter that changed everything. 3 days later, on October 13th, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter. It was typed, not handwritten, and attached was a square of Paul Stine's bloody shirt. The Zodiac wrote, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street plus Maple Street last night. To prove this, here is a piece of his shirt. I am the same man who did in the people in the North Bay area." There was no doubt anymore. The killer of Paul Stine was Zodiac, taunts and threats. But he didn't stop there. In the same letter, the Zodiac made a chilling claim. "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire, but then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. This was no longer just about murder. This was terrorism. The threat caused mass panic. Police vehicles began tailing school buses. Some children were kept home for days. Parents demanded action. The Zodiac had found his new weapon, fear, and he wielded it with precision. The Man on Jackson Street. After revisiting the area and re-interviewing officers, investigators realized what had happened. Zodiac hadn't fled far. He'd likely escaped into the Presidio, the military base and forested park just a few blocks away. Dense woods, trails, underground drainage tunnels. It was the perfect place to vanish. Officer Falk, in a later memo, admitted, "We drove right past him." That moment, that missed encounter, would haunt San Francisco police for decades. Zodiac's changing pattern. The Paul Stine murder was different, radically different. Urban, populated, high-risk, method, close-range gunshot to the head, trophy, a piece of shirt, not a taunting message, until days later. Escape, calm, collected, witnessed, yet vanished. Some profilers believe this was a turning point. Zodiac's ego had grown. His confidence had reached a peak. He wasn't just a killer, he wanted to show off. That he wanted to outsmart everyone. And so far, he was winning.
No pattern.
The FBI struggled to create a cohesive profile.
Zodiac wasn't like other serial killers.
No consistent victim type, no sexual motivation, no clear geography, no method repetition. He didn't escalate in a traditional sense. He morphed, shifted, adapted. It was as if he read the news, saw how people reacted, and adjusted accordingly, like a chameleon that fed off headlines.
The more people talked about it,
the more he changed. The Paul Stine murder unleashed a media storm unlike anything before. Zodiac was in San Francisco. He had escaped in plain sight. He had mocked the police, and most chilling of all, he was still out there. The press ran front-page articles for weeks. The composite sketch was everywhere: bulletin boards, stores, schools, TV stations. Hundreds of suspects were reported. Neighbors accused neighbors. Co-workers whispered suspicions. Yeah, Zodiac stayed one step ahead, always watching, always writing. In the weeks that followed, the Zodiac sent more letters, sometimes to the Chronicle, other times to TV stations. He included cryptic symbols, bomb diagrams, insults to police, philosophical rants, and always the chilling salutation: "This is the Zodiac speaking." In one letter, he claimed to have a bomb ready to destroy a school bus. In another, he criticized the sketch: "The police shall never catch me because I have been too clever for them." He signed some letters with his crosshair logo and a strange counter: "Me, 10, SFPD, 0. To him it was a game. To the city it was a nightmare, a city gripped by fear. By November 1969, Zodiac had become San Francisco's boogeyman. Locksmiths couldn't keep up with demand. Gun stores ran out of stock. Citizens walked faster. Doors were double-locked, and every cab driver feared they might be next. Kids talked about the Zodiac like a ghost story, but it wasn't a story. It was real. And no one knew where he'd strike next. Forensics and dead ends. Police collected fingerprints from Paul Stine's taxi, a partial bloody print from the passenger door, glove prints from the interior. But none of it led to a confirmed match. The bloody swatch of Paul's shirt was the only tangible proof of Zodiac's involvement. But Zodiac had left no hair, no usable DNA, no clear path, just symbols, just words, and the stench of a man who thrived on confusion. The disguise stripped away. Unlike the Lake Berryessa attack, the killing of Paul Stine was raw and clinical. No costume, no knives, no lies about prison escape. Just a single bullet, to the head, and a man who walked away calmly through a residential neighborhood, under streetlights, past witnesses, and past cops, realizing this was Zodiac unmasked, not by identity but by intent. Defiant, he wanted the world to see what he could do. Arrogant, he wanted a challenge. The murder of Paul Stine changed everything. The Zodiac had invaded the city. He had left a trail of physical evidence, and still he escaped. To this day, Paul Stine is the last confirmed murder attributed to the Zodiac. But the story didn't end. More letters would follow, more ciphers, more claims of victims no one could verify. And in 1970, the Zodiac would make a chilling pivot from murder to manipulation. He would taunt TV stations, target celebrities, and unleash a cipher that took 51 years to decode. San Francisco, November 8, 1969. The Zodiac Killer had vanished again. Not physically, no, the city still trembled under his shadow, but in presence. After the brutal slaying of Paul Stine, he retreated into the ink and paper from which he controlled the city like a puppeteer pulling threads of fear. And then, he struck not with a gun or a knife, but with something more terrifying, a cipher. The envelope was addressed to the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside, another letter, another riddle. This one was different. No quick brag, no demand for credit. This time the killer wanted to be decoded. A cipher of nightmares. The paper held 340 characters, a baffling grid of letters and symbols, now famously known as the 340 cipher. While his first cipher had been cracked weeks after it was published, this one would remain unsolved for decades. He wrote, confident, "This is the Zodiac speaking. Chuckle. I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me." That wasn't me on the TV show. The killer was referring to a television broadcast where a man, claiming to be the Zodiac, had called in. But the real Zodiac was quick to correct the record, reasserting his presence with venomous confidence. What followed were lines of coded symbols, appearing like a deranged typewriter had vomited across the page. Circles, triangles, backward letters, hieroglyphs. A map, a clue, a taunt? Size? No one knew. The cipher became an obsession for amateur sleuths and cryptographers alike. FBI analysts worked around the clock. Even military codebreakers took a crack at it. Days turned into weeks, months into years. The cipher refused to yield its secrets. Meanwhile, Zodiac's pen didn't rest. The psychological chess game. Only a day after the 340 cipher was received, on November 9, another letter arrived. This one was chilling, not because of what it revealed, but how Zodiac casually corrected the San Francisco Police Department's assumptions. Casual. "I gave the cops some bussy work to do to keep them happy." Sinister. "I shall no longer announce to anyone when I commit my murders. They shall look like routine robberies, killings of anger, a few fake accidents, etc." It was a declaration of psychological warfare. He knew law enforcement was chasing his tail. He knew the public was hanging on to every word, every symbol. So he wielded that power like a knife, not to kill, but to carve fear deep into the fabric of daily life. Television anchors began nightly Zodiac updates. Newspapers ran front-page diagrams of the ciphers. Talk shows debated the killer's intelligence. Was he a madman or a genius? An army veteran? A codebreaker? A schoolteacher? The Zodiac Killer, without lifting a finger, had become the most famous person in Northern California. Chuckle. And he loved it. The threat against children. On December 20th, 1969, another letter arrived. This one delivered the most terrifying promise yet. "Just thinking about my next delight," coldly. "If you want to catch me, I'll cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again, until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend." He signed off with his chilling trademark, a crosshair symbol and a tally of victims. But the most haunting part? Sadistically. "School children make nice targets." Coldly. "I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." San Francisco exploded in panic. Police vehicles began escorting school buses. Parents refused to send their kids to school. The idea of sniping children turned Zodiac from a serial killer into a domestic terrorist. It crossed a line, a point of no return, and it was precisely what he wanted. He had proven that fear alone could be as effective as bullets. Behind the letters. The letters were not just threats. They were layered in arrogance and riddles. The handwriting, always the same, blocky, precise, almost robotic. The same spelling mistakes, the same ironic tone. Experts believed the writer was mimicking poor grammar on purpose, like a predator pretending to limp, luring prey in. Each letter revealed more than it said. The use of certain phrases, busy work, delight, kiddies, hinted at a man who was both educated and disturbed, someone who understood the media, knew how to control the public narrative, and relished in the chaos he sowed. For years, forensic linguists would study these texts. The psychological portrait that emerged was terrifying. A man who likely had a high IQ, possibly military training, and a compulsive need for control. But most importantly, he was patient, playing the long game. Copycats and chaos. Zodiac's fame gave rise to a grim side effect: copycat killers. Police departments across the United States began receiving similar letters, some clearly fakes, others disturbingly close to the original. Law enforcement resources were drained. False leads flooded hotlines. The real Zodiac was buried beneath an avalanche of imitation, and still the real killer wrote. One letter arrived with a map, a supposed clue to a buried bomb. It included instructions on how to decode the coordinates using magnetic north and his beloved cipher. Police scoured the area near Mount Diablo, but nothing was ever found. Steady, questioning. Was it a hoax? Steady, speculating. Or had they simply missed it? Zodiac was playing both detective and killer, choreographing a dance of deception across the Bay Area. Steady. Cipher cracks decades later. What makes this chapter in Zodiac's legacy so haunting is that the 340 cipher remained unsolved for 51 years. Generations of codebreakers tried and failed until 2020, when a trio of amateur sleuths from the United States, Australia, and Belgium finally cracked it using modern software and computing brute force. The message? Tauntingly, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." He spoke about death with serenity, with joy even, but notably the message contained no identity, no name, no specific clue to who he was, just more bravado, more fog. The cipher wasn't a clue to catch him, it was a psychological middle finger. He wanted the world to know he was steps ahead, and always would be. By the end of 1970, the Zodiac had sent dozens of pages to the media. His kill count remained unclear. His taunts became more theatrical. And despite every detective, every task force, and every sleepless night, the killer still signed off with one word: Zodiac. By the early 1970s, the Zodiac Killer had carved his name into American criminal lore with blade, bullet, and pen. But then, silence. Letters stopped. Killings, at least those definitively linked to him, ceased. And just like that, the ghost slipped back into the fog from where he came. But the Zodiac's disappearance didn't end the chaos. In fact, it was just the beginning of a different storm, one driven by obsession, theories, and an avalanche of suspects. The copycat epidemic. As Zodiac's media power grew, so did his influence over the public's psyche. In the years following his last confirmed letter, in 1974, hundreds of letters were mailed to newspapers, police departments, and private citizens, all claiming to be from the Zodiac. Some were obvious forgeries, clumsy handwriting, unfamiliar phrasing, odd symbols that didn't match the originals. But others were chillingly accurate. They mimicked the phrasing, the tone, the menace. The problem was by now anyone could access the content of his earlier letters through press coverage. That meant the line between genuine and fake blurred dangerously. Did the real Zodiac continue to write sporadically through proxies? Or had others merely stolen his identity to keep the nightmare alive? One such case came from Albany, New York, where a letter mailed in 1973 echoed Zodiac's voice. It threatened a school administrator and included a new cipher, short but perplexing. The FBI filed it under possible Zodiac correspondence, but no one could say for sure. The real Zodiac may have stopped, but the mythology he built became a template for terror, a gallery of suspects. From the beginning, law enforcement knew that whoever Zodiac was, he wasn't just a murderer. He was someone who craved legacy, someone who wanted to be remembered. That single psychological thread tied together the dozens of suspects that filtered in over the decades. But a few rose to the top. Arthur Lee Allen, perhaps the most infamous Zodiac suspect of all. Alan, a former school teacher from Vallejo, was first interviewed in 1971. He matched several disturbing details. He owned the same brand of typewriter used in one Zodiac letter. A friend claimed he talked about wanting to kill people randomly and write letters to the press. He wore a Zodiac-style watch bearing the killer's signature crosshair logo. He had been dishonorably discharged from the Navy and fired from multiple jobs for misconduct with children. Yet, nothing stuck. No fingerprints, no DNA, no direct link to the crimes. Even after Alan's home was searched multiple times, and after his death in 1992, investigators found nothing conclusive. Richard Gaikowski. A journalist with radical views, Gaikowski edited a leftist newspaper in San Francisco during the peak of the Zodiac's reign. Some handwriting analysts believed his style matched the killer's. Others pointed to his knowledge of code, proximity to the crimes, and erratic behavior, but again, it all circled back to circumstantial evidence. Lawrence Kane. Thoughtful Kane was a convicted sex offender and had worked in areas near Zodiac crime scenes. Darlene Ferrin's sister, the woman killed at Blue Rock Springs, later claimed Kane had stalked Darlene prior to her death. He also suffered brain trauma that may have impacted impulse control. Still, no physical link tied him to any Zodiac crime. Over the decades, more names would be added to the list. Ex-cons, war veterans, mental patients. Some were compelling, others were red herrings. But one thing united them all: none could be proven guilty beyond doubt. The code that wouldn't break. Despite technological advances, the Zodiac's ciphers, especially his final 13-character and 32-character codes, remain unsolved to this day. Some theorists believe they're intentionally unsolvable, that Zodiac, ever the manipulator, simply filled them with meaningless patterns to taunt codebreakers. Others argue these short ciphers hold the killer's true name, and the right mind could still unlock it. But the longer time passed, the colder the case grew. Science versus myth. Excited. In the 2000s, forensics made leaps Zodiac never could have imagined. DNA sequencing, voice analysis, algorithmic fingerprint matching. In 2002, a partial DNA profile was extracted from the envelopes used by the Zodiac. It was compared to Arthur Lee Allen's DNA. The result? No match. Later in 2018, investigators announced they'd be retesting the letters using next-gen forensic tools. True crime communities held their breath. Would DNA finally unmask America's most elusive killer? The answer? Still nothing definitive. Part of the problem lies in the sample's degradation. After all, the letters are over 50 years old. Worse still, if the stamps or envelopes were licked by someone other than the killer, say a family member or someone he manipulated, then the DNA profile would be irrelevant. The one piece of science that seemed close to a breakthrough was handwriting comparison. But even that field is murky. Different experts drew different conclusions. Some matched letters to suspects, others disagreed entirely. And in court, handwriting analysis is not ironclad. It became clear that the Zodiac killer hadn't just outwitted the police. He had timed his crimes perfectly, at the edge of an analog world, before digital forensics could expose him. Zodiac in the internet age. The story didn't fade, it mutated. Online communities like zodiackiller.com, r/Zodiac Killer, and thousands of YouTube videos began keeping the legend alive. Amateur sleuths shared theories, hunted down relatives of suspects, and pored over pixelated photos of handwriting for clues. In 2021, a group calling themselves the Casebreakers claimed they had identified the killer as Gary Francis Post, a deceased house painter and Air Force veteran. They pointed to similarities in photo evidence, alleged confessions made to friends, and scars on his forehead that they claim matched the Zodiac composite sketch. The FBI responded tersely. The case remains open. No new information has definitively identified the Zodiac killer. Even in death, Zodiac's identity remains officially unknown. A ghost with a pulse, thoughtful. So what becomes of a case like Zodiac? Reflective. It lives. Short pause. Not in courtrooms, not in jail cells, short pause, but in the minds of those who still seek answers. From the moment he wrote, boasting, "I am waiting for a good movie about me," Zodiac knew he was crafting a legacy bigger than any prison. He wanted to be eternal, and he succeeded. His name evokes mystery, fear, and obsession, the ciphered enigma, the killer who controlled a city from a typewriter. A man without a face, but with a voice that echoed through generations. Zodiac may be gone, lingering, but his shadow, long pause, whispering, still watching. By 1974, the Zodiac Killer's voice, once booming from the front pages, had become a whispering whisper. But the fear he seeded didn't vanish with the letters. It only morphed into something more gravely chilling, a legacy of unanswered questions, decades of speculation, and a case that became as legendary as the man himself. As we trace the final notes in his disturbing symphony, we're left to wonder thoughtfully. Did he vanish? Or was the silence part of his plan all along? Trying the last official letter. The last official letter, oistily or generator exploring the fresh dash is Nida's news. Idinum to la culture children's streets. A month through the Hassan element. It's symptoms of sharing the Solman standards. This final a person is the letter in Markle. And we fit a casing this buck, and like we's to final and childer. The last letter officially attributed to the Zodiac Killer arrived on January 29, 1974, titled simply, Exorcist Letter. It read, sarcastic. I saw and think The Exorcist was the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen. Ominously, I am now in control of all things. The letter referenced the popular horror film The Exorcist, mocked the concept of demonic possession, and ended with a cryptic symbol, a circle with a cross and 13 lines extending from its center. It was signed, as always, with the infamous crosshair. But this letter was different. There was no mention of new victims, no threats, just puzzled strangeness, a surreal message wrapped in dark humor. Also a traces more, then came silence. The police waited. Newspapers braced, but days turned into months, months into years, and the man who once promised to pick off children as they come bouncing out of the school bus had gone, gravely, quiet. Some believed he was dead, others that he was imprisoned or institutionalized, and a few believed he was still out there, watching, whisperings in the unofficial letters. Though law enforcement only recognized 7 letters as officially Zodiac authenticated, dozens more trickled in over the years, some postmarked in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. Each claimed to be the gravely long-lost voice of the killer. Some referenced his past murders. Others claimed responsibility for new ones. In 1990, a letter postmarked from Eureka, California arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. It read, chillingly, "This is the Zodiac speaking, ominously, I am back with you." The handwriting bore some resemblance, the phrasing, thoughtfully, disturbingly familiar. But without a definitive cipher or forensic tie, it joined the growing pile of possible but unverified correspondences. The pattern repeated itself again and again. The further time marched, the less certain the experts became. False leads and vanishing clues. Despite advancements in DNA analysis, forensic linguistics, and behavioral profiling, every path toward unmasking the Zodiac ended in fog. At least 2,500 suspects have been officially investigated, yet no arrest, no confession, no verdict. The Zodiac case is now a testament to how imperfect justice can be when evil wears a mask and plays a long game. Witnesses were inconsistent. Composite sketches differed. Letters were tauntingly ambiguous. Even the killer's weapon choice shifted between stabbings and shootings, intentionally chaotic to confuse profiling. In 2004, the San Francisco Police Department officially closed the case due to lack of actionable evidence. But closure, that never came. The 2020 Cipher breakthrough. In December 2020, over 50 years after it was sent, the Zodiac's infamous 340-character cipher, once deemed unbreakable, was finally cracked. A team of amateur codebreakers from the US, Australia, and Belgium used custom-built software and linguistic algorithms to decode the message. It read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." While chilling, the message revealed no name, no location, nothing useful to identify him. It was exactly what Zodiac always intended, a puzzle with no reward. The FBI confirmed the validity of the solution, but quickly reiterated the case remains open. And just like that, the moment of triumph felt like another taunt. Theories that refused to die. Despite the dead ends, theories flourish like wildfire. Some are grounded, others pure conspiracy. One theory suggests Zodiac was a member of the military with cryptography training. His codes, tactics, and cold emotional detachment mirrored intelligence officers or Signal Corps veterans. Another posits he had multiple personalities, each letter representing a different alter. A sociopath so fractured he used personas as camouflage. A darker theory claims Zodiac wasn't one man at all, but a small cell, maybe connected by ideology or ritual, executing murders and letters as a twisted performance. But one theory stands out for its chilling simplicity. The Zodiac Killer was just a man, a deeply disturbed man who needed to be feared, and when he felt satisfied with his legend, he stopped. Pop culture and the Zodiac myth. While the killer disappeared, his story exploded into the cultural zeitgeist. Books, TV specials, conspiracy websites, and award-winning films breathed new life into the mystery. David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr., introduced the case to a new generation. Its haunting tone and refusal to offer closure mirrored the real story. The killer won not because he escaped, but because he became immortal. Even in pop music, comic books, and fashion, the crosshair symbol has been appropriated, often without full understanding of its origin. A serial killer's brand transformed into a cultural artifact. The Zodiac didn't just kill people, he hijacked narrative. He became the director of his own horror show. And we, the unwilling audience, can't look away. Where he may be now. Assuming the killer was in his late 20s or early 30s during the initial killings, he would be in his late 80s or early 90s today, if still alive. But if he is alive, he would have watched the world change. DNA put murderers behind bars decades after their crimes. Cold cases got solved, confessions were extracted from long silent killers. And yet, Zodiac's identity remains locked away. Maybe he's in a retirement home, watching true crime documentaries about himself. Maybe he's in a hospital bed, beyond recognition, laughing silently as experts guess the wrong name for the 100th time. Or maybe he's already buried, his secrets rotting quietly in an unmarked grave. We may never know. A chilling ending or a new beginning. In recent years, renewed efforts, both official and amateur, have begun probing new angles. A private forensic lab has reportedly used next-generation sequencing to reanalyze the Zodiac letter's DNA. AI tools now simulate Zodiac's writing, trying to match known samples. Online sleuths digitize every scrap of evidence, hoping for overlooked patterns. But so far, nothing, which leads to one terrifying possibility. The Zodiac Killer didn't escape justice. He designed a crime that justice could never reach. Legacy and blood and silence. Most serial killers die obscurely, captured, forgotten. But Zodiac? He lives on in every cipher never cracked, every forum thread, every chilling whisper of "this is the Zodiac speaking." He didn't just haunt San Francisco. He rewrote the rules of fear. He taught us that names can be illusions, that patterns can be distractions, and that sometimes evil doesn't need a face to win. So here we are, over 50 years later. No name, no trial, no end. Just a chilling echo, carried through decades of silence. I am waiting for a good movie about me, and maybe he still is.